Losing weight isn't easy, and some days we can feel like we need some extra help. Welcome to the Weight Loss Warrior podcast, the show where we share inspiring real-life success stories from normal, everyday people like you and I. Listen to how each of our guests managed to overcome their personal challenges to lose the weight they wanted, as they talk about the secrets to their success and give great advice that you can benefit from. Become part of our tribe and use the Weight Loss Warrior podcast as your source of motivation and support to help you on your weight loss transformation. And now, your host and friend, Carl Radley.
Hello, and welcome to another special edition of the Weight Loss Warrior podcast. Today with me, Claire, your host, and we have Carl with us again as our special guest. Hi, Carl.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm really well, thank you. And thank you for coming back to do part two. It just shows that part one wasn't a complete disaster and you enjoyed it at least a little bit.
Yeah. And you're okay with it being this dynamic for another episode, so that's good.
At least one, yeah, probably just this one, and then I have to go back to being in control again. But but no, I felt like after the first episode, talking just about myself, it would also be nice to maybe talk about the podcast a little bit as well, so it's not just all about me.
Yes, I think you're right, and you know it's such a powerful podcast. So many people are benefiting from. So let's talk about it.
Thank you.
First thing is when you were talking in the previous episode about your journey, I was really surprised that it's that recent. Mm-hmm. You only started your journey, was it 2021?
No, 2022. So it was a year ago last January. It was last January.
And now we've been going for a year with the podcast. So you must have, gained momentum pretty quick, and your passion has sailed you through to this point. So how did you get started?
Okay, so yeah, it does in some sense. It doesn't feel like it's possible that it could be a year that a podcast has already been live. It just really doesn't feel like it. But you're absolutely right. It really was the momentum of starting a healthier lifestyle last January, losing weight, going to the gym, organising my diet, focusing on some other personal goals as well regarding my career, and just really focusing on myself and improving myself. And then we were visiting the UK last August, and we usually do it for like a couple of weeks in the summer holidays where my wife and I will work from the UK. We put the kids into like a summer camp where they can make friends and practice their English. And it worked really well last year. And there was one particular day I was just having a chat to my mum. We stay at my mum and stepdad's house. And I was talking to my mum, who I mentioned in the previous episode, but for anyone who's not heard it, she's been doing Slimming World for years. She's the person now who does the weigh-ins because, that's how long she's been there. She has arrived to that kind of status and level. Yeah. She's the one who weighs the other people. But she's been going for so much time and has never really hit her target. She's got close a lot, but then her weight's fluctuated and she's gone back and she's gained weight, but she's never hit her target. And I guess I said it. And this, obviously, we have to understand this is all pre-podcast. So I've learned and developed a lot in terms of my own thinking and attitudes towards this. But I said to her, why do you bother? Why do you bother going if you haven't hit your target for all of these years paying to go? And she said to me, Carl, if I didn't go, I don't know how much I'd weigh right now. I honestly don't know how much I could possibly weigh. And that kind of, it hit me a bit because I thought, okay, so she uses it for the accountability. She's got a lot of good friends there, but obviously emotionally, she needs that kind of support. And I said to her, okay, fair enough, but why do you feel like you've not hit your target? And she said that in between weigh-ins, she goes on a Wednesday to weigh in, but in between weigh-ins, she gets very lonely. She doesn't feel that she's supported at home. It's just her, my stepdad, and my youngest brother, the middle one actually, not the youngest. But she said that she feels like she's very much on her own as part of this journey. And first of all, it made me really sad because I felt like I'd let her down in some way, whether it was because I abandoned my hometown and moved to Barcelona, whether it was because I wasn't very supportive in her weight loss journey. But it really sat badly with me. I felt very bad about it. And I guess I went to bed that night thinking about it quite a lot and went to sleep, and about 2:30 in the morning, woke up and I couldn't get back to sleep. And I didn't at that moment necessarily link it to that conversation I'd had with my mum. But you know what it's like when you can't sleep and you're thinking and everything goes through your head. Well, that kept coming back to my head. And I was thinking, like, how could I help her? And not only that, how many other people must there be who have that same feeling of loneliness when they're trying to improve themselves or lose weight, even with the accountability that they might get from a weekly weigh-in on whatever program they follow? How many people could be like that? And then the first thought I was, how could I help all of them? Which is obviously not possible, but at the same time, I wanted to know, what could I do? And I've got one of these brains that is always thinking of a new business idea. I honestly, my wife gets so fed up with me. I'm like, we could try this, we could make this and sell this, and we could do this. And I've always had this kind of spot. And some things have been successful, some things have been absolute failures, but I'm constantly thinking of how to create a business out of something.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, my first thought was, how do I make a business out of helping people who want to lose weight? But then there was this emotional attachment to it as well, in how do I help people like my mum who are suffering? And then over the course of that, probably next 2 hours, I was wide awake by then. I came up with this idea of a podcast in which I would help people, or people would be able to listen and get the support that they perhaps needed in moments that were particularly difficult for them. And the reason I thought about doing a podcast was that you can listen to it at any time, doing anything. And so it was very individual. It wasn't like a weight loss group that you had to go to a certain place at a certain time, regardless of how you felt.
Yeah.
It could be 11 o'clock at night. It could be 6 o'clock in the morning. But if you all of a sudden needed a bit of extra motivation or support, I thought a podcast could be there to help somebody. And so that was the original idea of what I would do. But at that stage, I hadn't really got down the content or how I would perhaps approach it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that night.
And you hadn't done a podcast before on something else, or like you new to podcasting?
Never. So yeah, the thing was, no, I've never done a podcast. When I was a kid, I say kid, maybe like 15, 16, I wrote letters to a lot of hospitals and universities who may have had radio stations, asking if I could perhaps DJ on them. The fact it was writing letters gives you an insight to how old I am, because email wasn't available then. But I was contacting them because I'd always had this fascination with being a DJ, like a radio DJ. And as soon as I thought of a podcast, I thought, I think I'd really enjoy that. I feel confident to speak, and people have told me that I had a good face for radio. So
I mean, I didn't say it.
No, but the fact that we're doing this with a camera on has probably already lost 40% of my usual listeners. At least you're here to keep balance, but it just felt like something I could do. And so I spent the next few days basically looking for other podcasts that were helping people in weight loss. And I seemed to find the same thing, that it was weight loss coaches, for guys, it was very much gym based, quite masculine, focused on, if you want to lose weight, you go to the gym. And for women, it was much, more soft and suave and emotional. And out of that came the idea of being, what does everybody love, or what do people find motivating? And it was success stories. It's hearing an underdog story, hearing somebody who struggled and came out the other side and achieved their goals. So I thought, quite honestly, there must be a load of podcasts doing this that are sharing people's success stories on a regular basis, because podcasting is not new. Absolutely. So I thought, okay, could I compete with this? And I started looking for these podcasts, and I just literally couldn't find any. At least the ones I found, like the Slimming World podcast, for example, was only focused on Slimming World in that case. Whereas I couldn't
Yeah.
find a single podcast that catered to anybody, regardless of what your weight loss method was. So I thought, okay, perhaps, and having listened to some podcasts before that talk about, you have to find your niche, you have to find something that makes you stand out and unique. And so I kind of had this vision of being the first podcast that shares success stories from people who have lost weight on a regular basis from a whole field and different areas of weight loss, as long as it's something that's considered safe and people aren't really doing a lot of harm to themselves to achieve that weight loss. And that was really the original concept. And the fact that I couldn't find anyone else doing it scared me a little bit, because I thought, okay, there must have been loads of people who have tried it and it failed. Or I started getting this excitement that I stumbled across something and an idea that could be potentially successful. So I got to work on it.
And that's the beauty of your podcast, is that you take everyone from a variety of backgrounds and everyone's got such a unique story, but we can all relate. We can all relate to each other. And then, as you're saying, like you do have that sense of community where, I mean, sometimes that's enough for people just to be like, oh, they just articulated how I've been feeling and I haven't been able to articulate that. Oh, I'm not alone. Oh, it's not just me. I'm not crazy. That's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does your mum listen
completely
to the
agree.
podcast?
So, okay. So my mum doesn't know I'm doing the podcast.
What do you mean? Do you mean this episode or the whole Weight Loss Warrior podcast?
No, so my mum has no idea that Weight Loss Warrior exists. And yeah, crazy, right? And as I say it, it sounds a little bit stupid, but
it's very interesting. I want to know why.
So when I started this, I set myself an objective that I wanted, in order to motivate me to build this podcast and to reach as many people as possible. One of my biggest goals was I wanted my mum to hear about the podcast through somebody else telling her about it. Have you heard the Weight Loss Warrior podcast? And for her to discover it's actually her son who's the host of it. So while that sounds like a great, and I'll explain why I'm very conflicted and why I'm laughing about it, because whilst I love the idea of her discovering it that way and finding out that, I'm doing this podcast and I'm helping people, because I think she'll be quite proud of me for it, which is important.
Of course, yeah.
And then obviously I want to help her reach her target and be a guest on the show talking about her journey. That for me is like the ultimate.
Yeah.
But then there's part of me that's thinking, wow, there's a whole year just gone past, but she could have been getting help and support and motivation, the whole reason I've started this podcast. And she's got no idea that it's even there, because she's not very, she's not using Spotify. She's not on Instagram. So there's part of me that's like, should I have told her and like get out of my own way a little bit about this romantic idea of her discovering the podcast and really try and help her now, rather than waiting for her to perhaps one day maybe discovering it. Maybe she never does.
Well,
What do you think I should do?
I think you should meet yourself halfway and be like, have you listened to the Weight Loss Warrior podcast? I listened to it this week. It was great. I got some really good tips from it. Why don't you give it a listen? And then she'll still discover that it's her son. But you've just steered her in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think you should do that.
I think maybe I should.
Or like be with her when she listens to it. If she doesn't have, if she's not set up with like Spotify, or you can be like, oh, should we have a listen to this while we have a cup of tea or whatever it is?
Yeah. Maybe I could do like run a live episode and give her a call and say, hey, Mum, guess what? She's gonna say, are you gay or something? She's gonna wonder what on earth, I'm ringing her up to tell her this big surprise all of a sudden. But I think the thing is as well, I'm getting close to it happening, because I've had Emma, who is a guest who's in my hometown. Recently, a couple of PTs in Braintree are following me. So I feel like it's so close to maybe happening. But at the same time, I'm not trying to influence it. I want it to happen naturally, because for me, it's like part of the journey.
Yeah, and I can see that, and it is very poetic, and I like that. I wonder if the Slimming someone. I guess the hope is someone at her Slimming World group will hear of it and talk about it in group. That's
That's
probably
the
the most
hope.
appealing. Yeah.
That for me is probably, I think, the most viable way that it's going to happen. It's So I don't know, and you know, this is something I tell you. I could ask everybody who listens to this to tell me what I should do.
Yeah.
Please, you know, I'm gonna ask the audience on this one. Should I tell my mum? Should I not tell her? And maybe someone's going to tell her for me now. Who knows?
What the only thing I'd say with like philosophy on life is it's better to regret doing something than not doing it. And I don't actually see that you would end up regretting telling her, but you might regret not
No.
telling her.
Yeah.
There's a risk with
Yeah.
not
And
telling
also
her. Whereas
because,
with telling her, there's no risk.
of course. And what if this is the key to her actually finally reaching her target? Again, I don't want to be arrogant in saying it, but what if this motivates her and she gets the support that she needs by listening to a podcast and she reaches the target? She could actually be pretty annoyed with me, but I didn't tell her sooner.
She will absolutely love listening. She'll probably, once she knows about it, she'll go through all the episodes and spend all her time listening. She'll love listening to you. Like, it's only going to bring positivity to her life.
That's true. But I'm going to probably have to go back and listen to them all myself. Just make sure I haven't said anything that's going to
take it from me.
Disappointing me.
No, she will be so proud, and it will help her. And then she can spread the love with all the people that she think will benefit from it as well. I think it can only be a positive thing. That's my advice.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
Fair enough. No, I like that, and I'm still gonna put it out to the audience and say to anyone who listens or watches this, what do you think? Am I being selfish? Perhaps I am. But still, anyway, so that's basically why she doesn't know, and that's really how the podcast came about. And I started basically. Do you want me to carry on? Sorry, I'm making assumptions here. Should I carry on with the story of the podcast, or what would you like me to do?
Yeah, go on.
You're the host. Okay, good. I just thought I'd check, you know. Normally, I don't want to take over. This isn't my show.
I'm not bossy.
So, no, not at all. But be bossy if you need to be, okay? You have that full permission. So, from there, basically, I've had the idea of doing it. I had a 2-week holiday in Mallorca the last 2 weeks of August, which was great because it meant I wasn't working. And I could focus my energy on starting a podcast because I wanted to start as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But then it was bad because I had a 2-week holiday and I already, just telling my wife I was bringing my laptop was kind of like, why do you need to bring it? And I told her about the idea. But anyway, so I was getting up at 5 a.m. I was waiting until everyone was in bed and then opening my laptop then. But I was so excited about doing it that it didn't matter. And I was able to make progress. And I started reaching out to people, funnily enough, from Slimming World. I started looking for people who had lost a lot of weight. And Slimming World for me felt like my comfort zone where I knew how the plan worked. Knowing in the UK, it's one of the biggest communities of weight loss. So I felt like that was a good place to start. And I found quite quickly a lot of people who were sharing their journeys and sharing their stories and started reaching out to people quite simply, just reaching out to me and say, hey, I've seen your journey. I think it's amazing. Would you like to talk about it on a podcast? People like yourself, Claire. And
have people said
I was amazed
yes,
at how
readily? Or have you had many people be like, no, I don't want to share?
I think, I have had people say no. I've had some people say they don't feel ready. Some people say they're not where they want to be. Some people just not interested.
Yeah.
And in the very, very beginning of the podcast, it was more tricky because I had no credibility at all. I don't have much now, to be fair, but I had no episodes to go on. Nobody knew who I was. I had a poorly made website, a profile with like 36 followers. So it's like, who is this guy telling me he's got this great podcast when he has no episodes to show me or anything else? But luckily, some of the amazing people just said, yeah. They said, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And I think because I was honest about why I wanted to do it, I told them, who I was trying to reach, why I wanted to help people. And you mentioned before about this community. people who have been on a journey and improved themselves, whether it's mentally, physically, and share their story on Instagram, are kind of already willing to share because they're doing it with their own personal account. So it's really just another avenue of sharing their story. And so it wasn't such a big leap for most people because they were already willing to help others and helping others in some case. In most cases, anyone who's sharing their story, I believe, is helping others, whether it be, one person or 1,000 people, by sharing tips, advice, and the things you've done to lose weight. It will inspire somebody, I promise. So I organized some of the very early interviews. I got some software organized. I had an old microphone down in the basement I pulled out and blew the dust off of, and went from there. And then literally within 2.5 weeks, recorded and shared my first couple of episodes. So
I was just wondering
I was
how
all of a
many
sudden a
people
podcast
you
host.
have.
How many episodes?
No, as in, like, I'm looking at your Instagram, you got over 3,000 followers. Do you know how many people, like, listen? Do you get information, like, how many people listen to your episodes? How many times it's been
I do.
downloaded?
So I do. And I don't want to sound like an idiot saying this, but I'm not sure I'm 100% willing to share the exact figures
Sure.
because it's growing every single month.
Wow.
Which is, I mean, but when we talked about in part one, the fact that I went through a difficult moment in the early part of this year with the podcast, with myself, the numbers started to drop off because the consistency wasn't there. So
Okay.
the downloads is definitely a direct example, direct impact of the consistency in doing the show. But the interesting thing is now that I'm back up to the same numbers I was at while I was doing 2 episodes as I am with 1. So it kind of, if you remember, I was talking before about the worst thing that could happen by only doing 1 episode. And my biggest concern was that I'd help less people. I'm actually still having the same amount of people listen to it, even with 1 episode as I did with 2. So I've kind of put that demon to bed now because I'm still content I'm helping people, or at least people are listening. So yeah, I was quite nerdy at the beginning and checking my download stats every single half an hour to see how many people had downloaded and when the peaks and troughs were. And it's important to an extent because if one episode's particularly popular, it gives me an idea. I'll listen back to it and think what made it potentially popular. If certain days they spike, what caused that to spike? Did somebody share a piece of, maybe share a post referencing me? Does somebody talk about me on YouTube or something? Things like that. So there's definitely an importance of having that, but I didn't want to become obsessed with it because really for me, my biggest scale of success from day one and still is today is the ability to help people. So obviously the more downloads I get, I realize that there's a percentage of those people that will be inspired or feel supported by that, which for me is the most important, way of gauging my success with the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone will take at least one thing from every episode. I really, truly believe that.
I hope so.
In your last,
I hope so.
In the last episode, you talked about the challenges you faced this year, and you just touched on it again with losing some momentum and losing some motivation and gumption with it. You've overcome that. So you feel like you're in a good place with the podcast and you're still enjoying it and you're going to continue.
Absolutely. And so I feel like now I have my rhythm back. And again, I think it's very easy when one thing's not going well in your life and then you see something else starts to trail off a bit, that very quickly everything can seem like it's going wrong. And so I started having doubts about the podcast and whether or not I should do this. And it came very, very close to a point, probably around March, April time, where I nearly just stopped altogether. And I'm so glad I didn't. I really am, because by May, I was back into the rhythm of doing 1 episode a week, and that's continued. I just had a week off because I was on holiday. But the difference between that and when I'd missed weeks previously is that day there was no episode. I felt absolutely fine about it because I knew there wasn't going to be an episode. I'd planned for it and I felt completely at ease with it. and I felt like I
Yeah.
deserved a break for a week. So that was great, because quite honestly, the amount of time that goes into every episode, from the recording to the editing, well, you'll find out, Claire, because obviously as the host, you're going to be the one editing this
I was
episode.
wondering
Is
if
that
you're
right?
going to. Oh, absolutely. I'll apply some filters for a starter.
Excellent. So I think the time that goes into it, investment, and it does, it's not free either. I'm spending my own money currently to have a podcast. And the strange thing is as well that if you think that at the beginning, my idea was, how do I create a business from this? But a whole year later, I'm still very much invested in it, very passionate about it. And I'm not yet at a stage where I'm monetizing it or even looking at how I can potentially make money from a podcast. It's not my focus, because I've realized that my podcast, it helps people. It does a certain job. So why would I need to perhaps mess with that? Why should I try and take that away from people? If it's genuinely helping people, then that needs to stay as it is. And I did try back in January with like a membership group where I was gonna, I tried charging people to become part of like a private group where I had the intention of giving them additional support and help, and I couldn't manage it at that time. With trying to do 2 episodes a week, with everything else trying to be managed, and in the end it failed completely. And it was very kind of the people that supported it and joined and were willing to pay, but I wasn't delivering what I said I would. And I just, in the end, I said, look, the group will remain, but there's no charge anymore, because I'm not able to deliver what I said I would. So again, something I learned, something I failed at. It hit me a little bit harder because it was going through a time where I was like having a lot of doubt and a lot of imposter syndrome about whether or not I was qualified to really be a podcast host when I was failing myself.
Yeah.
But so lots of things happening in the background there, but it's got to a point now where the podcast, it ticks along. I find it easier to reach out to people and secure new guests. I have a better structure in place, and I'm enjoying it. I'm genuinely enjoying the whole process now of sharing podcast every single week. And that's so important. And it's kind of now almost got me to the place where I'm thinking, and have been for some time, what next? How do I expand on this? How do I make Weight Loss Warrior? How do I brand it really to get to that stage where it could potentially be a business, but not where I'm kind of selling out at any level, not where I'm doing it at the detriment to the people who listen and the people who gain something from it. But at the same time, I think it's fair, if I'm able to generate something with this, if I want to create a business from it, I'm looking how to explore that at the moment. And so that's currently where I am at the moment. And I mentioned on the previous episode about getting into coaching. And that for me is kind of like where my focus is going now, being complemented by the podcast.
So have you started this journey then with the coaching? I don't even know how you become a coach. So enlighten me.
So basically, I went through some coaching myself and was very fortunate to be invited to a mastermind group with a couple of other coaches. Very, very funny, but inspiring people. And we get together every now and again and have a chat and just talk about things. And I thought about being a coach before, because in my career, just in day-to-day life, I've always been somebody who likes to help others, somebody who likes to share my knowledge, somebody who coaches just instinctively. I enjoy being a leader. I've got a team of people in my career. I've been a manager in other jobs. So coaching for me is something that I get something from, something I enjoy. But I'd never really considered doing it in the weight loss industry, partly because I've always been overweight and didn't feel like I was qualified to do it. Although at the same time had the knowledge of what could make it successful for somebody, just didn't feel like I could do that because I wasn't walking the walk myself. But through that, I started looking into it and started a few months ago an accreditation course in which I'm learning the tools, the methods, the ways of creating a program in which you can coach people through pretty much anything, but how I can apply this to mindset and help people who are trying to lose weight. And that's my main focus, really. It's not providing people with a meal plan, not providing people with a weight loss method, but I want to work in parallel with people who are losing weight or have found a plan that works for them, but for whatever reason can't sustain the weight loss. So people who are yo-yo dieters, people who have very low self-esteem or low self-confidence. And it's so many people, and doing the podcast has opened my eyes to this, that so many people will lose some weight. They'll feel motivated. They'll join a weight loss method, whether it's one they do at home, keto, calorie counting, or go to a club, Weight Watchers, Slimming World. While they're motivated, they'll lose some weight, but something will happen. And it could be any kind of triggering thing in personal life. It could be something, but this cycle repeats and repeats of this yo-yo dieting, of people then gaining weight again and rejoining when the motivation starts, or because there's a wedding in 6 months, so they want to look their best for it. And we talk about it a lot on the podcast, but I strongly believe that weight loss companies, weight loss methods only focus on the tools to lose the weight, the actual physicality of losing weight, but don't necessarily do enough to help people understand why, after they've lost the weight, it comes back again, and sometimes in a much worse way. So I want to work in parallel to that and help people, coach people through teaching them, really teach them methods to deal with the things that hold them back or cause them to return back to gaining weight again, so that they don't have to go through that cycle continuously, so that they can use that weight loss plan that works for them, but make it the last time they have to do it.
Yeah, wow. I mean, do you think that's something that you'll end up doing on your podcast then? Do you think, would you have guests that, like clients that you're coaching, would you have them to come and share their stories? Is that how you...
I would absolutely love that. Yeah, that's part of the vision. So like, I don't, like I said, I don't want to fiddle with Weight Loss Warrior podcast too much, because at the moment, I mean, obviously there's always ways it can be improved, and I'm always open to feedback and listening to how that could be improved. And I'll always focus on doing that. But for me, sharing people's success stories who have been my clients, absolutely. Because again, I'm going to be completely transparent about the whole process of this and share this with everybody on the podcast anyway, or people that, are supportive of that. And part of that is, if I do want to turn this into a business, if I do want to dedicate the time that I would love to spend on the podcast, on the coaching, there has to be money somewhere. I have to create a revenue, and that's business, and that's absolutely fine. And I'm not going to go out to make as much money as possible, or to, like I said, sell out or squeeze people for money, because I think that the value of helping people is what really matters to me and is the rewarding thing. But at some point I need to replace current salary with paying the bills with coaching. So at the moment, it's quite a long way off being able to do that from a coaching perspective. And also I want to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. So then my time becomes a constraint, because I can only help so many people. So there's a lot of things I need to work out. And at this moment, I'm at a stage where I'm working with only a small handful of people, and we're working through my program that I've created, and it's going really well. I'm very, very happy with it. I'm learning a lot. I'm making mistakes. We're talking about it. We're progressing. And that's part of the progress, the process, the progression. And I'm absolutely loving it. So that would be part of it, in the future.
How long does it take to become a coach then?
So, I mean, quite honestly, and this is something that's quite dangerous in terms of, because it's not officially governed, anyone can become a coach. And if you look on the internet now, go on Google, you can get a coaching accreditation for like a pound if you want. There's courses, people promise you the earth for 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. And it's completely lawless in terms of, I could wake up one morning, decide I'm a coach, and start reaching out to people. And it's quite a dangerous thing, because of the fact there's a lot of people out there who are literally out to get as much money as possible. There are people out there who I don't think should necessarily be having conversations with people about such sensitive topics that are so close to people's hearts. And there's a distinction here I think is worth mentioning about learning to become a coach, but the difference between therapy and coaching being that therapy really looks at your past and unpacks everything but, trauma, things that you've gone through and why you really arrived to how you are today in many aspects. Whereas coaching kind of just takes you from today and looks forward in terms of, okay, what behaviors could you change in your future to serve you better in the things you want to achieve? And so there's a lot of therapists who, there's a grey area there, or not even a grey area, there's a crossover between therapists who become coaches and coaches who study to become therapists. But when you consider the path that somebody has to go on to become a qualified therapist, which is extensive, and then all of a sudden people can more or less reach out to anyone in the same way and say, hey, I'm a coach, I can help you fix all your problems. It's very scary. And I'm very aware of that. And a bit nervous about it, to be honest, because I'm not a qualified therapist. I don't have a psychology degree or anything else. So I have to really make sure I'm very conscientious of the fact of how carefully I have to tread and the topics and areas that I think could potentially hurt somebody more than help them.
Yes, but your morals and your values are in the right place. And the fact that you're even thinking, oh, I need to be careful, shows that you will be. And that you won't take advantage or exploit anyone or do any damage because you're already thinking, how can I protect everyone else? It's like they say parents, don't they? Like at the end of the day, you can think you're a rubbish parent because you shouted or whatever. But the real rubbish parents aren't thinking, oh, I was a rubbish parent today. The very fact that you're thinking, oh, I wasn't very good at this, shows that you're a good parent because you're reflecting and you're aware.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a good point.
Also, you're making me feel like I want to go and get a coach now.
Coaching is amazing. It's something that, I've done it I've actually had experiences with two different coaches. One person who was getting started, and so I was spending time, and then more recently with Aaron, who's part of Synergy Coaching. And Aaron's amazing. He's an actual force to be reckoned with. He's ex-military. He was in the SAS. He's ran Ironmans and goodness knows what else. He's such a nice guy. Like I said before, he's a massive Tottenham fan as well, just like myself. So we had something to talk about in the first instance. But he's so good at what he does in terms of helping people find progression. And he was actually, when I first started coaching with him, I had another business idea and he was coaching me through that. But I came to the realization that this business wasn't going to work because I didn't have the marketing budget. It was a great idea and it is working. It was selling and creating natural spices and herb blends for people who are doing calorie counting. But I just, to penetrate the market, would just be impossible with me sat here. So it never happened, but he helped me to get to that realization. But everything I'd learned coaching with him, I think has aided me to create the podcast because he gave me all of these tools and focus, but I was just looking at the wrong thing in that moment we were speaking. But as soon as I looked at the podcast, it's given me so much help. And I think coaching is something that, I mean, if you speak to any successful person in business, high performing athlete, every single one of them have coaches for the reason that they draw the progression out of those people. And it's almost like you have a mirror to reflect from and somebody to help you who's looking out for your best interests. And I'd highly recommend coaching to any single person. I'm not saying, come to me and let me coach you. I would love to coach as many listeners who would love to work with me as possible. But everybody has different goals, different objectives. And I'm going to be very much focused on one area of helping people in parallel to their weight loss. But there's business coaches, there's life coaches, there's so many different types, and definitely look into it because I think it's a very valuable tool that every single person should have access to. Yeah,
I'll definitely give that one some thought. Well, good luck with that because I really do think you'd be brilliant, and I could see how much value you could give to people. And just your responses when people have shared their own experiences, that sometimes you sort of can repackage things in such a positive way and help people come to their own realizations. And I think that will serve you well with this next
Thank you.
venture.
That's good. Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate the kind words, and there's something that feels right about it, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want this to sound arrogant, and it's really not coming from that aspect. Maybe by saying it's not arrogant makes me arrogant. I don't know, but I feel like I've found the thing that I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And the fact that I've done it for a year without even worrying that it's costing me money as opposed to how I can make money from it, it's a constant reminder every day, because I get a message on Instagram from someone saying, I've just listened to this episode, it really helped me. Or I see someone share a story saying they're walking their dog, or even this afternoon, I'm getting my steps in listening to Weight Loss Warriors. That, it's reduced me to tears on many occasions where I'm just like, wow, people are listening. I'm going to probably cry now. There's people listening, getting something from something that I'm doing. And that for me gives me so much purpose that I don't think any amount of money is really going to replace that. But unfortunately, I'm at a situation now that without focusing on that to some extent, I'm never going to be able to develop this in the way that I want to. So, for the podcast, I'm going to be looking for sponsorship. And funnily enough, I've actually had somebody offer to sponsor the podcast, but it was car alarms and home alarm systems.
Right.
And yeah, because the thing is, there's advertising platforms that you can use, and they'll play an advert at the beginning, the middle, or at the end. But again, I don't want to just for a small amount of revenue, or even a large amount of revenue, take anything away from what the podcast is about, which is helping people. So I don't want people to be interrupted, by an advert for a house alarm. The other one actually that I was in talks with people was for life insurance. And I'm not saying to anyone that they shouldn't have life insurance, but it just didn't resonate well with me that we're talking about an episode of people losing weight, improving themselves, finding success, and it's, oh, well, make sure you take out life insurance just in case it doesn't work out. It just didn't feel right. So I've turned down opportunities to actually monetize the podcast already. And I'm sure, hopefully, I've got a couple of little targets that I would, companies I'd absolutely love to work with. But I don't want to push it. I don't want to go too soon. I think, you may only get one or two opportunities with some of these companies to collaborate. So I'm kind of biding my time, waiting for the opportunity, and hope that it manifests when the time's right.
Your heart's in the right place. And everyone appreciates all the time that you're putting in. This is your time. But also, like, you're obviously doing the right thing, because your face lights up when you're talking about the podcast. It gives you enjoyment. You're learning from the guests that you're speaking to. You're helping people. It's ticking all the Carl boxes that makes Carl, I guess. So keep doing it. And slow and steady wins the race.
And I plan to. Absolutely. So, yeah, we'll keep going and keep bringing interesting guests. And I guess this would be a good moment to say two things I'd love to, if I can. First of all, that if someone's listening to this and would love to be a guest on the podcast, reach out to me. I'd love to hear your story. And ironically, actually, what I'm about to say next is something that we had a conversation with before you became a guest on my show. And that was, to be a weight loss warrior, you don't have to have lost 10 stone, 15 stone, 20 stone. And one of the things that I often hear from people is, oh, well, I've only lost 2 stone. Like, I'm not really a weight loss warrior. I'm not really qualified. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because it's not about that number on the scales that we talk about so much. And, it frustrates me a lot, to be honest with you, because it's the journey you've been on. It's the time you've invested in yourself. It's the effort and dedication you've gone through to improve yourself. And that's what the spirit of being a weight loss warrior is. It's not a number, whether it's 1 stone, whether it's you've stayed exactly the same weight, but you've learned to love yourself. We always focus so much on the physical side of it, but I really want to start working more on the mental well-being side of things, the mindset side of it, because that for me is the absolute key to sustainable weight loss. And so, if you're someone who may feel that you've only lost a small amount of weight, but you're proud of your story, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. And the second part to that is, if you have an idea for any local company, major company that has a service or product that you feel might be a good fit for the podcast, or they might be interested in working with me or collaborating in some way to benefit us both, let me know, or reach out to them and maybe just say to me, check out Weight Loss Warrior podcast because Cole's awesome. So yeah, they're my 2 plugs I wanted to get in. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very good. I like that. I think that sounds like it would be possible as well, doesn't it? It's like this would be a really good way of some sort of collaboration to move forward and into the podcast. I just want to ask you about the Weight Loss Warrior tribe. Can you say a bit about the tribe? What's the vision?
Course.
What's the tribe? The tribe.
So the tribe, the Weight Loss Warrior tribe, these are the amazing people, some of which have been guests on the show, some of which have been listeners from the beginning, some people who discover me, as recently as my last episode, but resonate with the podcast, people who take something from it, be it a source of entertainment, something to listen to, are deeply inspired by the guests and their story. But my vision for this is creating an environment and a community of people that's first of all safe for people to go to, share ideas, share problems, share successes, make friends. Because don't get me wrong, without Instagram, the podcast would never have got off the ground. And I absolutely love Instagram for that. And I think there's so many sources of inspiration on there, but it's very unregulated. And for every inspiring account, there's probably, unfortunately, 5, 6, 7 that are people trying to get your money, or people with unrealistic body types, or people who are there to try and knock you down a peg or two or make you feel bad. So I'm not slating Instagram, and I'm definitely not trying to pull people away from Instagram in the same way with the coaching. I'm not trying to pull people away from the weight loss method that they're using, but I just want to create that community where people can feel safe to share their journeys, help each other on each other's journeys, and celebrate that success together. So there's a group over on Facebook, Weight Loss Warrior Tribe. Everyone's welcome, no matter what weight loss method you're following, have followed, whether you are midway through a journey, whether you are wanting to get started but scared to, don't know how to get started, unsure. There's people in there with almost no self-confidence and have come for support. There are people who have absolutely smashed all of their goals and are helping those people. So it's for everybody, providing you're nice. And like your profile says on Instagram, don't be a dick, quite simply. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on my podcast. I
was wondering that. I nearly said it myself, but I'm glad you said it.
Yeah, and I think I might have to tick the box now to say that there's swearing on the podcast. Well, is it swearing?
It's language.
So it's in the dictionary. It can't be swearing. That's what I always used to say when I used to get told off for saying a bad word.
Good comeback.
So yeah, so let's end on don't be a dick, and
don't be a dick, everyone.
Yeah, and I hope to see you in there. But no, joking aside, I'd absolutely love to see as many people in that community as possible, because I do plan to bring other experts to that, as I did back in January, but just the timing wasn't right. I wasn't in that moment to be able to execute what I wanted to. But the plan for that, as it grows, is to bring in people who can add value and help. So doing workshops, talking about topics that are very close to people. For example, one very, very common issue that people suffer with is binge eating. And so I'd love to bring some experts, people who have studied and really know what they're talking about, to come and give a free webinar, talk about that, to provide extra support. Because I realize I'm not an expert in these things. As time goes on, my goal is to study these things and become an expert. But until I am, I'm not going to pretend. So if I can find somebody who really knows what they're talking about, who knows their onions, as my grandma would say, to come in and do that, that would be fantastic. So it's all about, again, creating community, providing support.
Brilliant.
And there'll be a link in the show notes to join Weight Loss Warrior Tribe.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, Carl. It's been an absolute pleasure to host your show, and I definitely don't feel like the host, especially because you're the one sat there with giant headphones and a microphone, and you look so professional, and I don't.
it's taken a year to get to this status of, the big microphone and the head. It's actually a really tiny microphone. I've just got it very close to the camera.
But you got your big chair as well, your big comfy chair.
Yeah, that's my other job, just to make me look like I'm important. Okay. But no, it's something that I really appreciate you taking your time to do this. In the same way I appreciated you being a guest on the show, and I'd advise any single person who's watching this or listening to this now to go back and listen to Claire's story, because it's fascinating. She's a lovely, lovely person. She's done amazing things, and she's a true weight loss warrior.
Thanks. Sometimes I listen back to my own episode to be like, what advice did I give? Because like you said earlier, sometimes you don't take your own advice. You're great at giving it, but sometimes you don't take it. So yeah, thank you for that. That's really nice. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we close? Anything I missed?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody once more. Really, everyone who's helped me make this possible. The guests, the listeners, people who send me a message and say, Carl, your spelling's atrocious in that email you just sent out. Would you like a hand with it? Or the people that tell me that the microphone level wasn't loud enough on that episode, because all of these things helped me to improve. And people always do it very, very respectfully. And I'd encourage, if you have an idea, if you hear something, if you've got feedback that would help me improve, please share it. And I guess the last thing, there's a third plug here, but it's my show the rest of the time. It's your show today, Claire, but today, no, normally it's my show, so I feel like I can say this. If you do enjoy the podcast, one thing that's going to help it grow, one thing that's going to help reach more people is to give it a review on either, I think, Apple Podcasts. You can write a review. So if you listen on an Apple podcast, you can write a review, and I'd really, really appreciate that. On Spotify, you can give it a rating out of 5 stars. So all of these things are going to help the podcast grow and reach more people, and ultimately help more people. So I'd love people to do that. And if you know someone who might benefit from listening to it, be it a single episode or the podcast in general, please share it. Please let people know, and just say, there's some Essex boy talking about weight loss that I think you might get something from. And we all know it's not really about me, though. It's about the guests that make this show so special. So thanks again to everybody.
But it was nice to have this episode and the last episode about you. It was nice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Everyone's appreciating it.
I promise we won't do it again, though, for another year, at least.
Oh, wouldn't that be good, though, to do it again next year? See what else has changed.
Well, you're booked in now, so that's it.
I might charge next time.
Yeah, okay. Well, hopefully if the podcast's making money by then, I'll be able to pay you.
There we are. There's our aim.
Find me a sponsor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Claire.
Okay, great, Carl. Thank you for today. And then we have the music that goes ding 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 ding, and then we have Carl's voice, but today you've got mine to say. I'd also like to say a big thank you to you, our listeners. I appreciate you joining us for the Weight Loss Warrior podcast, and would love that you become part of our tribe. Ooh.
Nailed it. That was amazing.
Absolutely.
And not planned. Thank you. That's made my night. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. That was awesome.